In my last video, I gave you 5 rules to follow if you want to survive your business life. One of the main rules I told you guys about was that you cannot live paycheck to paycheck when you work in business. I was specifically targeting people starting out with this rule. You know, I was talking about when you have a good month, you can't just live like a king because next month things might not go so well and you gotta keep surviving. But today I'm here to give you a very different perspective on it. I'm here to show you that this rule applies to every stage of your business life, even when you're already successful and doing really well for yourself. And I'm gonna use my father's story as an example. He, as you know, is my mentor if you've been following my videos, and he did pretty well for himself as well. But his story really shows why you always have to follow this rule no matter what. And yeah, let's get straight into it. So my father, just like me, really didn't like school at all, and he started to work pretty early. I think he was 17 or 16 at the time, so right around the age I started, and he became a mechanic. He went to an auto shop from an actual car brand, so not just a random auto shop somewhere. And from there he worked a few years, maybe until he was 24, 25, and then he got promoted. He became an actual salesman for the brand that owned that auto shop. He worked there for another 3 or 4 years, maybe 5, I'm not really sure. And that's where he started to learn business and sales and how to sell to people and all that important stuff. Eventually, things didn't go too bad there, and he chose to part ways with the company and start his own thing. He rented a small place to use as a dealership, and he was at it for a while. He opened this in like, I don't know, 95, 96, and he only closed it in 05, I think. So he was at it for almost 10 years, around 8 or 9. And he didn't really enjoy any of those years. He quickly realized that cars isn't a great business when you're working on your own. You know, a lot of paperwork, you gotta deal with loans, you gotta deal with angry customers that come back complaining about their cars 2 years later, as if buying a used car isn't always a gamble, you know. They kind of acted like it was my dad's fault because he sold it to him, but he can't really get him or anybody. You can't really guess when a used car is gonna fail you. And he also realized what's one of the worst things you can do in business, and that's asking for your own money. Something I've also talked about before, but in cars especially, you'd give out a lot of, you know, you take it now and then you pay it for a few months and whatever. Not actual bank loans, but kind of a loan in the actual dealership, and the clients would keep paying. But then out of nowhere, they stopped paying, and then my dad had to be the one calling them and dropping by at their places and houses and whatever, asking for his own money. And trust me, that sucks. I didn't do it much because he told me not to do it from the start, thankfully. But the one time I did do it, it instantly went wrong because the client didn't pay. And trying to fix that situation after is a bummer. Having to be calling and showing up and asking for your own things, trust me, it sucks. Never do it. So he really wasn't enjoying himself. He wasn't happy at all. Cars also have another major problem where you make a sale, you get a lot of money, but then you can be like 3 or 4 months without even seeing a customer. Just full-on week sitting at an office doing absolutely nothing. Yeah, it's not fun at all. But unfortunately, he didn't get to close the business on his own terms. He had a partner who got into a tough situation and did some things he shouldn't have done. And since they were partners, my dad's name was also in the paperwork, so he had to answer for the things the other guy did, which means a lot of that. And he had to put a second mortgage on his house to be able to pay that. And to this day, he's still paying it, the mortgage. So yeah, really tough spot. And that was rock bottom for him, you know. A lot of that, a second mortgage, no idea what he was going to do, failed business, all that good stuff. But then something came around. He noticed a very specific niche in cars that was really growing and that he actually really enjoyed. And he got straight into it. He stayed in the automotive world. He didn't just completely change his career, but a different and very specific niche. And he went from selling actual cars to selling parts for cars. And this turned out to be the best decision he ever made. He got 1,000 euros and bought some things for that specific business, and he went out and tried to sell it. And he actually did. Every single thing he had. So he bought more and also sold it. And then more and more and more. And things just kept on growing. And call it really great timing or luck, but it went flawlessly. Just as he started working on this hobby in this specific niche just grew exponentially. It just blew up. It was everywhere in our country. And quickly, my father was the biggest guy with the biggest store for these kinds of car parts in our country. And you can pretty much see why. I mean, you add up his incredible skill at sales, plus his flawless timing, and it just is a recipe for success. I mean, there's no going wrong. So let me give you the real numbers here. He made, in 3 years, his best 3 years, his peak, he made 2.5 million euros in sales. And on the low end, his margins were almost €1 for every euro sold, which is absolutely incredible. And it wasn't just those 3 years, it was the 2 or 3 years before, following up to his peak, and then the few years after. Things weren't as good as his peak, but it still kept on sailing and doing pretty well. I've told you this in other videos, but in my country, a normal salary that's enough for a person to live and to pay their bills and everything, it's 900 bucks. 900. My dad made 2.5 million in sales. Again, not all of that's profit, but 2.5 million to a normal 900 bucks salary. You can imagine how great that was. It's very easy for someone who just came out of a very tough spot to live like a king when something like this happens. Imagine you just got out of a really tough financial situation and now just there's money pouring from everywhere. You'd probably live as if you were on top of the world, because you kind of were. But my father never did that. There were no 150k cars, there were no massive clothing expenses and show off to others. Whilst his competitors, for example, who never actually made as much cash as my dad, my dad was always the biggest shop, always. They were living like kings. I mean, everyone had BMWs, X5s, and dressing as if they were kings and things. And my dad never did that. He bought a 30k car. He dressed with the clothes from his company, with the logo and everything. And he lived normally. He enjoyed himself, by the way. He really did. But he spent his money on what actually mattered. He went out to eat with my mom. He went around the country. He always took vacations. Those kind of things. Whilst the other guys, his competitors, were buying super expensive cars and clothing and things to show off to others. Whilst they weren't even making as much as my dad. He chose to take that money and invest it. He bought houses. 4 houses. 1 in the beach and 3 in his city. The one he already lived in. He renovated them, he got people into them, and he started to receive rents and everything. And now you ask, why the hell would you do that if you're making as much money as you are? Well, he knew, and here's where we go back to the rule from the other video, he really knew that things would eventually go down. He knew that the good times weren't forever. And just as he predicted, things really went down, like really. Things like a financial crisis never seen before in my country. And the laws really going after modifying your car and not being allowed to do things which he did with the things he sold. You know, his business really started to shrink every year. 100k less, 200k less, then 50, then 40. Eventually, he got to the amount he sells pretty much today still, around 50, 40k. So with the numbers I just gave, you can really see how much things shrunk and went down. But his life had to keep going. And that brings us to where we are today, where he is today. Remember the houses I talked to you about? The one he bought in the beach and the other 3 ones? Well, the ones in his city are still rented, and he's actually living in the beach house. He spends most of his time there. He comes here every, 2 months or so, and just enjoys his life as a 50-something-year-old semi-retired man. I help him with his business. I'm using his warehouse for my own business. So today, his thing is mainly just picking up phones, because most of his clients are from far away in our country, and it's just orders. So he picks up the phone, they do whatever they gotta do. He sells them the thing, and then I don't mind just helping him, and I ship his orders, and that's that. And he makes around, like I said before, 40k a year, 40, 50 maybe, if things really do go well. And exactly what happened to his competitors, the one that bought the 150k BMWs? Well, he bought a 30k car. Well, their shops closed. My dad was at the time the biggest, and today he still kinda is. So their shops were the first to go. Which means, since they really didn't save anything, and they just spent it on cars and clothes and ego stuff, they had to go look for something else to do. Some of them opened other businesses. Others actually had to get a job working for someone else, making minimum wage. As a 50-something-year-old man, so imagine that. Life really turns around. But at least they still got their 150k BMWs that are now worth like 15, but hey, I hope they enjoyed them, I guess. And my dad is at his beach house right now. I just spoke to him on the phone, actually. He was about to go fishing. He does that a lot now for some reason. But hey, he's enjoying himself, and that's what matters. And I imagine that instead of this, he had to go look for a job at 55 years old, working on a factory or something. Yeah, that's not great, is it? And so that was his story. That's how he went from a very tough spot to a great spot. And then because of his mind and his thoughts and his willingness to not overspend and not give in to his ego, he managed to keep his life great, even after things slowed down. And why? Well, because he didn't live paycheck to paycheck, as I said before in the other video. So never forget, this rule applies to every stage of your career. I'm nowhere close where he was at his peak, but happily, I already know this, because he taught it to me, and now I'm trying to teach you guys. So don't forget, save your cash, manage your income, so you can one day, even after your main business slows down, spend your days fishing, like my father, and maybe me one day. So what's one thing you should take away from this video? Ego doesn't pay your bills. Don't spend your money on things that don't matter to you. Grab your wife, grab your kids if you have them, and just go spend your money on a vacation somewhere. Go out to dinner. I don't know, travel. Do whatever makes you feel accomplished. Don't spend your money on things that don't really matter to you just to show off to others. And next week I'll be back on Sunday. I'll tell you the story of an e-commerce shop I tried opening and how things really went south. And pretty much I'll give you a list of what not to do, because I did it. Pretty much everything you shouldn't do. So yeah, see you Sunday. Hope you have a great week. And please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye.